from someone that we've labeled the Texans insider, the top national Texans insider, and we haven't labeled it, but she's kind of earned it. Diana Rousini has established herself as the top Texans national insider. It's happened in the last 18 months, 2 years or so, but when it comes to national news, there's really not a close second. Diana Rousini's been all over it, and she breaks as many stories as everyone as anyone. And on this channel and on SNL with myself and Cody Stutes, we acknowledge that Diana Rousini, when it comes to Texans news, stories, all that, she's pretty much all over it. Before the draft, Diana Rousini said that the Texans were trying to move up. And we automatically believed it because of what she's established herself as. She also said something else that I thought was interesting. And Nick Caserio actually confirmed that they had agreed to a couple of trades. But this was what Diana Rousini said with Chase Daniel on her athletic show, Scoop City, about a potential trade involving 49ers tight end George Kittle. Let's hear what Diana said.
I know there was a team that had a conversation with the 49ers the night before the draft about a possible trade for Kittle, a second rounder they were looking to get in return.
Oh, what?
They turned it down. The 49ers decided to keep him and really move this situation forward by getting a deal done. But there was a little interest there, some poking around.
Why didn't they move him? The second round pick for a 32-year-old tight end, that seems like a really good return on investment, no?
I don't think the 49ers ever wanted to walk away from George Kittle either. I don't think George Kittle wanted to walk away from the 49ers. I think they always wanted to be together. Everyone just wanted to feel like they were winning in the negotiation.
Could you imagine Kittle not a 49er? It doesn't make sense.
Okay, it doesn't make sense, but crazier things have happened. And this got me to thinking. So Diana Rousini has a couple of teams that she's extra connected to. We've established the fact that one of those teams is the Texans. And this is just complete speculation, just complete thought. But because she is who she is and because the Texans are who they are and we cover them, it just makes me wonder, what if the Texans tried to trade a second-round pick to get George Kittle, and what if they got him? Let's just kind of break this down, and let's kind of just look at the clues as to why this would make sense in a hypothetical world if the Texans were the team that tried to get George Kittle, and let's say they offered a second-round pick. All right, here's the potential clues. So Nick Caserio said after the draft that the Texans, they stopped kind of trying to trade up in the mid to late teens. It was kind of confusing because you didn't know what offensive lineman would warrant trading up that far. And I know there's been speculation that maybe it was a receiver, but you kind of wonder if they would have really been that desperate to trade up for some of these receivers that were on the board. We also know that Diana Rousini knows the Texans, so let's keep that in mind. What if the Texans, because Kelvin Banks was the one guy that we thought would make sense, he was gone before, he didn't even last past the top 10. What if the Texans in this weak wide receiver draft with a offensive coordinator who acknowledges that he loves tight ends, what if they were trying to trade up for Colston Loveland and then maybe Tyler Warren, but that just basically got blown up because Loveland went earlier than expected and Tyler Warren ended up falling? What if the Texans were trying to trade up for a tight end and not one of these offensive linemen? Because Tyler Booker at 12, that might have been the best player on the Cowboys board, but trading up for a guard just seems a little bit kind of far-fetched. So what if the Texans were trying to trade up for a tight end? And what if the Texans were open to trading for George Kittle? Now, we've seen the Texans. Here's another clue. We've seen the Texans, when they have extra draft equity, show a willingness to trade for a veteran. They treat extra draft picks like they just got a bonus at work, and they go to the casino and blow the money. We've seen Nick Caserio do that all the time, sometimes in a matter of minutes. As soon as he gets that extra one, he's on his way to the casino. Last year with their extra draft pick, they traded for Stephon Diggs. They had an extra draft pick this year. It was a weak wide receiver group. What if they were trying to trade for George Kittle? D'Amico Ryans, he knows George Kittle. D'Amico Ryans is a guy who, I'm sure he likes what George Kittle brings to the table. And here's the other thing. George Kittle is the type of player where he, much like I talked about with Knoll today, he's a guy who can help the offensive line and he can help the pass game. He's one of the better receiving tight ends in the league, and he's one of the better blocking tight ends in the league, which can help an inexperienced offensive line. So he kind of helps both of your needs, and you still maintain your full draft equity because you have the extra picks. So I'm not sitting here saying that the Texans did try to trade for George Kittle. I'm just saying there are context clues to where if a team there's a lot of teams that you can cross off. Texans wouldn't be the most far-fetched. And based on who's saying it and the fact that she knows everything about the Texans, kind of makes you wonder. Now let's get into the next part of this conversation. What if the Texans did trade for George Kittle? How would you feel if they used one of their second-round picks to trade for George Kittle? So let's say they either end up not getting Higgins or they end up not getting Rousini. How does that make you feel? Let's say they get let's say they trade the Rousini second round pick and they come away from this draft with Higgins and Kittle. And maybe they go offensive line because they have Kittle. Who knows? How does that make you feel? I think it's intriguing. I do think Chase had a good point, courtesy of the athletic stream that Diana Rousini and Chase Daniel do. That, it is a 32-year-old tight end. I think there would actually be some pushback as to whether or not that made sense, and that's a smart way to use money. But Dalton Schultz is coming off the books after this year. That's $11 million. You're not gonna pay his guaranteed. So if you look at it as you're kind of filling in the spaces with what Dalton Schultz would be owed in year 3 of his contract, and we know that he's not playing for that salary after year 2. Maybe it's kind of a proactive move as well. It makes you good in the short term, and then it allows you to quote fall back on Kittle after Schultz leaves, which we know is going to happen because this time next year, Dalton Schultz is probably going to be off the roster. We don't know what Cade Stover is going to develop into. We don't know what Brevin Jordan is going to develop into. So tight end could be a big need. If you eliminate that with George Kittle, even if it's a small window, the trade might have actually made sense. There's a little bit of pushback, but when you look ahead, you look at the moment, you look at the past actions, and you look at the person that's saying it. Not too far-fetched to think that maybe the Texans were that team. What an interesting thing to think about.